Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today we are talking about the Aune S17 Pro EVO headphone amplifier. This is about an $800 unit. This was sent directly to me from Aune. They have asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation, which you are about to receive. If I am an affiliate link partner with any retailers who sell this product, I will put affiliate links down in the description below and label them as such. So if you like what I have to say about this unit and you want to help support the channel, please consider using one of those affiliate links. I will get a small kickback, and I only use affiliate link money to keep the channel running. All right. This review is almost a part 2 in a way, because I reviewed the original S17 Pro back in, I believe it was August of 2024. It is now May of 2025, and I have an EVO unit that I can tell you about here. So why is there a new unit called EVO, which I believe is just short for evolution, basically, of the original unit? Okay, we're going to get into that. There were a few ergonomic quirks that were happening in the use of the OG. And so Aune went back and fixed some of those. So did they succeed in those fixes? Do those fixes affect the sound at all? And is the S17 Pro EVO one of the best headphone amp options under $1,000 US? All of those questions and more right on the other side of shameless self-promotion.
Hello. I'm one of the reasons that Wave Theory can't spend all of his money on audio gear. He wants you to know that your support is vital for keeping the channel running. So if you enjoy Wave Theory's bussin' review riz and no-cap review style and want to encourage him to stay in the basement so I don't have to listen to his dad jokes as much, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also send him a donation on PayPal or sign up for the Patreon. Links are in the description. Now on to the review.
All right, so to answer the big questions, did Aune successfully fix some of the quirkiness of the original unit? And by and large, yes, I think they did. Still may not be perfect, but it definitely is a smoother user experience than it was with the original unit. Did that affect sound at all? Maybe. Maybe by just a skosh, which we'll unpack here in a little bit, but I could also be convinced that no, they didn't really either. So we're going to talk about that here as the review unfolds. So let's get into all of that. So first, let's run down real quick what issues the EVO is addressing over the original. All right. So the original headphone amp, the S17 Pro, sounded, still sounds great. Like, it was one of the best sounding sub $1,000 headphone amps available on the market. That still remains true, I think. It is one of the best sounding under $1,000 headphone amplifiers on the market. It really was never about its sound. It had some usage quirks in it. Like, for example, the headphone output and the preamp output were basically both active all the time. And so one of the things that the EVO does is offer the ability to switch between the two so that you can go in and manually mute one and use the other, although I don't think there is a mode where they are both active at the same time, if that is still of interest to you. The volume control on the original was also not the smoothest either. There were sometimes some non-uniform jumps in the volume level here with the relay volume control and all of that. I think it actually might be an R2R volume control in there. But also, like, when you'd adjust it with the remote here, and you see one remote controlling both units, it's not doing it right now, of course, because we're not there. It goes. Okay. Did you see how now, even though I've pushed the button on the remote the same number of times, we now have a different number here going on? The experience of changing the volume level here has improved on the EVO over the original as well. So that was another problem. Perhaps the biggest issue, though, was a thermal issue. These units, being Class A amplifiers, can run very warm. And they both have a high current output mode. And in particular here, there is a protection circuit on these that when they reach 69 degrees Fahrenheit, on in their operating temperature, and you see that there is a thermometer in the lower right of the screen here, the units will automatically kick down to the lower current output there to protect the unit here and make sure that it doesn't overheat. There is a slight sacrifice in the sound with harder to drive headphones with that current change mode right there. And so the original had a problem with that. There were several units. I don't know if every single unit that in their line did that, but a lot of them, they would, with a harder driving load in the high current mode, they would get up to that 69 degrees Fahrenheit too quickly, and then they would kick down to the lower output level, lower current mode to thermally protect themselves a bit. Okay, arguably too fast that would happen, and they weren't as a stable unit to use. They're up at that temperature for things like the HE6 series and all of that from Hi-Fi Men, which is hard to drive and also priced such that this would be an attractive amplifier model to run with an HE6 and so forth. So what they have done with the EVO is gone through and handled the thermal dissipation a little bit different. They didn't drill any more holes or anything like that in the chassis. I think all of the heat management is internal with some extra heat sinking and different shape on the heat sink and that sort of thing to dissipate that thermal energy a little more quickly and a little bit more uniformly. And by and large, I found that they have succeeded. And like I tried pretty hard to push this unit into its fail mode there in the high output mode, and just really never had an issue with it. So it also typically, when in use, runs between about 2 to 4 Celsius degrees cooler than the original. I found pretty consistently in my testing there when I had them side by side, plugged in, powered on, and switching back and forth between them with the same headphone to see how they sounded. And the newer Evo just was almost always, when they both got to their operating temperature, between about 2 and 4 degrees Celsius degrees cooler. All right. So those were like the usage quirks on this, and anything that I do think that they successfully addressed. What I want to do next is like get real close in here on the front panel with a different clip and talk about the differences in the display and some more on that user interface. So let's look at that. Then we'll come back and we will talk about what sound changes, if any, are present in the EVO unit. Getting up close and personal so that we can see the front panel displays here and how the units have changed here from the OG to the EVO, because visually the only difference between the two when the screens are off is that we have this EVO logo here on the EVO. Other than that, the chassis is the same. The placement of all of the jacks and the volume knob and the positioning of the screen, I mean, everything is identical in appearance with the exception of that EVO sticker. And then once you have the display on, there are some differences. Even the remote controls, okay, are the same. Same remote control as far as I know. Both remotes control both units. Okay, so there you go. Identical remote control. That's why I say a lot of the work on this review has already been done. So quick differences here on the screens. We see that on the OG unit, if you were in high current mode or 100 milliamp mode, it would tell you the amount of amperage that's actually coming out here. The EVO changes that to just amperage high, okay, or amperage low if you're in low mode. But you can still kind of see that they've got this red background here going on. Then we also have, we've got a temperature indicator on both of them, and then we also have gain high, or low. Okay, change those there. The other difference then in the display is up here on the EVO is it tells you which output you're using. So again, one of the issues with the older one, with the original, was that the preamp outputs were basically always active, and so were the headphone outputs, where in the new version, you can switch between the two, okay, pretty easily. And that actually just switched the input. You can't really do it from the remote, but you can switch the output. Okay, I think it's this button actually. Nope, that's the gain control. Is it even on the remote? Must not be. Okay, but you can switch here, and I have to remember how to do it. Let's see, do you push this thing? Nope, that's input. Okay, is it push and hold? Yep, There it is. Now you know that it's on preamp mode there on the EVO. Okay, and then apparently it stops worrying about the temperature output if you do that. Switch it back. Okay, and the must have to hold it again. Not the most elegant system, but it can be done. There we go, and then the temperature comes back as well. Okay, there you go. That is the operation there. That's the front panel. That's how they are different. Otherwise, like, there are no extra ventilation holes. The chassis is identical. Okay, on both of these units here, the ventilation is identical and all of that. All right, back to me on camera talking about other things. All right, now as far as sound goes, I don't need to spend a ton of time here, so we can wrap this one up a little more quickly than most of my very long-winded videos. All right, and that is because not much has changed. Both units are a Class A amplifier. As far as I know, the internal circuitry for the amplifier sections themselves is still the same. Same transistors, same basic design, all of that. So the amplifiers themselves are the same. I may have detected, well, so from that standpoint, then it's just worth saying that as a reminder, what you get here is a warm leaning, very smooth and relaxed and refined sound that still has a fair amount of particularly bass and deep bass impact and rumble and that sort of thing. You get, perhaps the most resolution and three-dimensionality in the soundstage and holography and all of that kind of stuff that you can get for an under $1,000 headphone amp. Okay, if it doesn't have those things, it's in the running for it. So all of those sound traits that I ascribed to the original unit have made it into the EVO unit, including a little bit of sensitivity to headphone pairings. All right, because it is a warmer, kind of thicker, stereotypically tube sounding amplifier, you do need, at least for my ears, need to be a little bit careful about what you pair it with. If you're pairing it with something that's already warmer and thicker sounding, like a Focal Radiance, just as one example that I have on hand, that kind of doubles down on that sound and can become a bit too much, a bit too thick, okay, a bit too bloated in the low end, okay, a bit too warm, that kind of thing for my liking, okay. But brighter, neutral to brighter leaning headphones and all that, I think are more at home here. So that's a similar trait that the two units share, again, because they have the same amplifier. Okay. I think that I detected a sonic difference between these two, and I don't think it comes from the amplifier section. I think it comes from the improved volume control on the EVO unit, and I will say that it is very minimal, and I had to use very super highly resolving headphones to hear it at all. And then when I went to less resolving headphones, even knowing what to listen for, I had a very, very difficult time picking out those differences. And they're within the range that I could very well be convinced that it was just my brain saying, hey, it's there, and it may not actually have been there, meaning that I doubt that I would pick it out consistently in a blind test. They are that close. All right. What am I talking about here, and what was the situation? So to compare these two, I initially brought out the Hi-Fi-Man Susvara Unveiled here, which is a recent addition to my collection. Hi-Fi-Man sent that over for review, so I am working on that review, and I use that as one of the headphones to test how these compare to each other. The EVO may sound just a hair cleaner, with a slightly quieter sonic background and just a little bit more spatial holography, specifically in the separation. The space between sounds may have sounded ever so slightly more natural and realistic and convincing through the EVO unit than they did from the original unit, maybe. Now, I dropped down to the HE1000 Unveiled, also from Hi-Fi-Man, right there. That is also super resolving, listened for those same differences, and again, as I just said, it was kind of in the range where I may have just been trying to convince myself I was hearing those differences rather than them actually being there at that level. So I think with most headphones that are realistically priced such that you're going to be using them with an under $1,000 amplifier, that most people are not going to tell the difference in the sound when both of these things are at their normal operating temperatures. When I was comparing the two of these, I did get a very clear object lesson in that not only do these units run warm, they sound best when they are already running warm. Like when I started doing comparisons and all of that, the Evo had been on my desk for days and weeks actually, just never being turned off and just running there. So it was just kind of sitting at about 61, 62 degrees C right there. And when then I plugged in the OG unit and started trying to get it to warm up to try to do some listening tests. And when it got up to about 55 C, I was like, all right, maybe that's close enough to start doing some listening tests. And so I did. And like the Evo was just clearly better sounding to me at that point. Like lots more resolution, holography, depth, punch, cleanliness. Okay, all of those things in the sound, they just sounded a lot more realistic and convincing. I was like, oh boy, man, maybe that volume control circuitry they put in there really does make a big difference. And the old volume control was just bad. But then doing tests the next night where the OG had also been left on all night, it got up to about the mid 60s, 64, 65, 66 Celsius degrees, whereas the Evo was still sitting at 61, 62. And when we got to that point, they sounded that pretty much even, right? And so that's where that's where I like my reports on these tests came out here. There is they just sounded very, very close there, with just maybe the slightly detectable difference on what could be one of the most resolving headphones on the planet right now. Okay, and then not as much on something that is still fantastically resolving, just not quite to that other level. All right, so I take that to mean that if you can at all, leave both of these units, whichever one you have, just leave it on all the time. Unless you're going away and you're not going to be using it for days on end, just leave it on because it definitely performs better when warm. All right. But other than that, like everything that I said about the Pro or the S17 Pro, the original, is basically true sonically here. The Evo just offers the ergonomic improvements here as discussed. So I don't need to rehash all of the sound things other than to say that yes, it is in the running for being the best sounding headphone amplifier under $1,000 US. It tilts warm. It's very smooth and refined, but still has some good dynamic punch and energy and physicality to the sound in there. It's got and probably class-leading resolution, holography, and all of that for the price as well. Excellent unit. It does run warm, even though the temperature management on the Evo version is an improvement. It still runs warm, so you're going to want to place it carefully. Make sure there's not too much stuff stacked up on top of it or around it. Let it breathe a little bit there so that it doesn't kick down the temperature in that thermal protection mode that often. Okay, and then yeah, just be careful with what headphone pairings you use with it. I think warmer leaning headphones double down on the warmth of this sound, and it's a bit too much. So I think neutral to brighter leaning is my preference and my recommendation for these amps. But otherwise, there's really no reason not to recommend the Pro EVO and say that it really is an evolution of the S17 Pro line and does make some very real user experience improvements in it. It would be the one to get if you can get it. It's particularly new, but the price on an used S17 Pros, the originals, is coming down. And so that becomes an even better value if you can get that one on a used value and you're able to live with its usage quirks. But all right, I will go ahead and leave it there. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Aune S17 Pro EVO. Good job to Aune. Solid product you've got here. Definitely gets my recommendation. To all of you, thank you for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Check out my PayPal and my Patreon, and generally do those things you do to support YouTube channels. And as always, enjoy the music.